Ghatafan. There is the Jews of Banu Nadir and Banu Qurayza and Banu Qaynuqa and Quraysh. And in the midst of that battle, Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud converts to Islam. He was from the Bedouin tribes of Ghatafan. And Rasulullah ﷺ also described him as a man in that moment, a man worth 1,000 men. Okay. Now, if you're not familiar with the Battle of the Trench and what happened next, I will just briefly say that Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud ended up unraveling that confederacy. All right. So the question that I want to ask you is this, and this is not a rhetorical question. I expect an answer in return. What is it that made any of these people worth 1,000 people? When the Sahaba referred to this being a man worth 1,000 men, this person is worth 4,000 people. There is a time when I believe Umar ibn Khattab described Al-Miqdad radiyallahu anh, as a man worth 4,000 men. So when that expression is used, what makes that person worth thousands? Yes. You know, there are cases where, like Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud was bold, but Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not. Okay, so let's say there were 2,000 Muslims fighting the confederacy. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not put him at the front lines and said, now go and be brave and die with honor. He had him concoct a plot to unravel the confederacy. So although the cases that I've mentioned kind of have a theme of bravery or boldness, I don't think that's it in this case. What makes someone worth 1,000 people? Okay, that's essentially where we're going with this. They were put in the right place at the right time. There is the case of, his name is escaping me right now, but one of the people, Tulayh al-Asdi, who claimed to be, he did the worst thing that you can do. He claimed to be a prophet after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Tulayh al-Asdi went around saying that I'm also receiving wahi, I'm also a prophet, I'm just like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the worst thing that you can do. After that, not only did he repent, but Umar ibn Khattab put him as a general in an army. So Umar ibn Khattab put him in one of these positions where he was worth 1,000 people. The key here in all of these examples is the right person being put in the right position at the right time. That's what it is. A lot of what I'm going to discuss for the remainder of my time is going to deal with the subject of delegation. The leadership quality of delegating the right people for the right task. And the reason why I've decided to go with this rather than speaking about Sultan Abdul Hamid and Izzuddin al-Qassam and Umar Mukhtar and all of these like historical figures is because for your time in the MSA and your time as a leader in the Muslim community here, we tend to have a struggle with the quality of delegation. Every generation in the MSA struggles with, and please, for those, how many of you have been involved in the MSA for more than 2 years? Okay, hands up, more than 2, it's okay, like if you haven't, but hands up if you've been involved with the MSA more than 2 years. Okay, so for those who are putting their hands up, I think you would agree in your observation that there is a disproportionate amount of work placed on very few people, and sometimes that's self-inflicted. So that's people saying, oh, I'll just do all of it. I'll just do everything. Because they are not capable or not willing of delegating. All right. Most of what I'm going to say for the rest of this time is going to deal with my role at Iqra Islamic School and the leadership observations that I've made there and the things that I've learned over the course of my 9 years as being part of the staff and also part of the administration. This is going to, the first thing that I will say here is going to be the least well mapped out and the least in my personal experience, leaders emerge organically. Essentially what I'm saying is people don't arrive at a genuine leadership position because they asked for it. In my personal experience, people become leaders because at a certain crisis point or at a very difficult time, people look to you for inspiration and help. What makes them look for you in that particular moment in time? Allahu a'lam. It all depends on what your track record has been up to that point. I'll give an example from the history of the MSA. An example of an individual that many of you may be familiar enough with. How many of you know Sister Tala? She is the daughter of Sister Arwa, who's a teacher at Iqra Islamic School. How many of you have met Sister Tala before? Okay. So when Sister Tala was in the MSA, she was an everything everywhere person. She's the one who knew how many chairs needed to be there. She's the one who knew how many water bottles needed to be there. She's the one who knew how to book the rooms, who to talk to, how much it all costs, all the Wi-Fi passwords. She's a logistician. She's in charge of all of those things. So when it came time when the existing executives began to graduate from SFU, she didn't have to volunteer herself as MSA president. Everyone just came to her. It was expected that this is the person who needs to be leading the MSA. Tala was like one of this generation's leaders, but in my time in the MSA, there was a sister named Sena Siddiqui, who some of you might be familiar with. She has a niece named Ammara, who's at SFU now, Ammara Siddiqui. So her aunt was one of these people who was just so active and so forward-thinking that when we needed an MSA president, there was just no doubt. There was no competition. If someone else had volunteered themselves and we needed to go to an election, it was just definitive who was going to take over at that time. So when people arrive at genuine organic leadership, it's often something that is so obvious that it's beyond the need for discussion. And it really is rooted in your track record. Now, in my time at Iqra, what I've discovered is that there are actually two types of leaders. There are, and if we have a question and answer after, I'm happy to hear your feedback and pushback, but this is my observation. There are visionary leaders, and there are architect leaders. The visionaries tend to be the ones with the grand plan